conversation. Belinda was one of our facilitators during the municipal facilitation process. So she's been through an evaluation of options previously and has a lot of the background. And with that, I will kick it over to Belinda to do any more of an introduction and get us going on our agenda. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Meg. Welcome, everybody. I'd like to just quickly go over the agenda and what we hope to accomplish today. And then I think it would be nice to just very rapidly go around the room and then go around the folks that are logged in online and just do quick introductions so everyone knows who's participating today. So as Meg said, today is kind of the kickoff meeting. We don't expect to get into the actual nitty gritty of problem solving today, but we wanted to convene the group and kind of get aligned on what the charter of the group is. And so the kind of the meat of today is to go through this draft charter and get your feedback and suggestions to make sure it's clear, to make it better, to cover anything that we might have missed. We put this together very quickly, Meg and I, over a course of maybe an hour or so yesterday. And so I fully expect that you will have some things to make it much better. And then I'm hoping we have enough time today that we can at least do a little bit of sharing of what your issues and concerns are. And I think it's good to do that in a balanced way, to ask you what you see as potential risks, things that we should be aware of so that we're managing those risks. And then also, what do you see as some opportunities and some positives? And so we're capturing some of those as well. And then we'll wrap up with talking about what comes next and getting some indication of kind of who wants to be part of the full-time task force and what that's going to look like. Any questions about the agenda or what we hope to accomplish today? Well, let's do just really quick introductions and I'll start. I'm Belinda Bro with Bro Leadership Solutions and I'll be your facilitator.
Good morning, I'm Nancy Burke with the United Way, and I've been in and around this world for many years. For 13 years, I worked at the Mental Health Trust Authority, establishing the pre-development program, specifically looking at facilities for persons with special needs, and then did something in the middle there. And recently I'm working on housing programs at the United Way.
Great intro. Hi, everyone. Felix Rivera, member of the Anchorage Assembly representing Midtown and chair of the Assembly's Housing and Homelessness Committee.
Josh Lowers from Coven House, Alaska.
Eris Bermanis with Solid Medical, and we've been providing medical support throughout the pandemic to the quarantine and isolation facility, and then also with the non-congregate shelters currently.
I'm Kelvin Lee. I'm just, as a community member, I just wanted to see what you guys are doing. I'm from Fairbanks, so kind of been watching you guys a lot, so figure I'd get some information, maybe go back, help them out. But I'll be transitioning in between the Anchorage and Fairbanks. So.
Kathleen McLaughlin, I'm the owner of Restorative and Reentry Services, LLC, and was under contract with Beans when the mass shelter was initially created in Sullivan.
My name is Grace Gallagher. I've worked in the nonprofit realm, particularly in serving our individuals experiencing homelessness for about 10 years now. And over the last 5 years, I've been working in homelessness data for the state of Alaska.
Donna Graham with the Family Cold Weather Shelter, Central Lutheran Church.
I'm Meg Zalatel, Anchorage Coalition of Homelessness.
Prince Wanted Revive Alaska Community Services.
Rob Marks, Rural Cap.
Eric Milliken with Catholic Social Services.
I'm Dave Kuiper. I serve with Christian Health Associates and part of the team bringing together the emergency shelter for families, standing up by October. We hope, we pray, we work.
I'm at a speech disorder. And I was Lutheran Church with the local organizing ministry.
Nikki Chewbacca, HR Director for the MOA. I've been on the board of the coalition for a couple of years. Was also on the board of Rural Cap for a short stint, and privilege when I was an assistant commissioner for the Department of Education to have worked also with Covenant House on that $1 million a year grant that we got in perpetuity for our youth, which was really exciting, exciting development. Really looking forward to what we can do with all of this. So thank you for the opportunity to be here.
I'm Carmen Wallace with Provide Alaska Community Services.
I think with the Provide Alaska Community Services.
Brian McFetchins, South Central Foundation, Behavioral Services.
Meg, could you maybe help facilitate the folks that are online and are getting introduced? I think you probably have the best vantage point.
Sure. I'm actually just gonna run down as folks are listed in the participant list and call on you if you'd like to do a brief introduction. Starting with Bill Falsey.
Hey, this is Bill Falsey. I'm currently serving on the Anchorage Coalition and Homelessness Board.
Thank you. Chelsea Arthur.
Hi, Chelsea Arthur from Alaska Housing Finance Corporation.
Thank you. Chris Kolarak.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Chris Kolarak. I'm with Coconut Housing Authority. I'm on the boards of the Alaska Coalition and the Anchorage Coalition and Homelessness.
You guys hearing okay? All right. Next we have Christopher Schutte.
Good morning, Chris Schutte, private contractor with Ship Creek Community Assets 1 and 2, the owners of the former Sockeye Inn and the former Beans Cafe. Thank you.
Thank you. Kevin Cross.
Kevin Cross, District 2, Anchorage Assembly, Chuyak Eagle River. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Denise Delgado.
This is Kat Delgado, Anchorage Social Service Director with the Salvation Army.
Next, Elizabeth. No last name. Not hearing from Elizabeth. Hopefully we can circle back. Emily Edenshaw.
Good morning. My name is Emily Edenshaw. My Yupik name is Kenagnagiagak. I am Yupik and Inupiaq. My family comes from Imanak, Alaska, and I've had the honor to live and work on the Dena'ina lands as the president and CEO of the Alaska Native Heritage Center. I also serve on the coalition's board. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Daryl Hess.
Good morning. My name is Daryl Hess. I currently serve as the Anchorage Municipal Ombudsman, and previously I was the city's first homeless coordinator between 2009 and 2012.
Thank you. Jennifer Smurd.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Smurd with Alaska Housing Finance Corporation and the Statewide Homeless Housing Office.
Thank you. Jessica Parks.
Hi, my name is Jessica Parks. I am the Housing Operations.
Oh, Jessica, you muted right in the middle of that. You want to try again? Well, Jessica is also the chair of the Advisory Council, which is the governing body for the continuum of care. Next is John Weddleton.
Hi, John Weddleton. I worked at increasing levels with homelessness on my 6 years on the assembly, along with the rest of the assembly, and since about a year ago was in the facilitated group. And I'd hope that I will be able to participate and kind of share what the work that we did during that time since about August of last year, which was fairly extensive. Thanks.
Thanks, John. Nathan Johnson.
Yeah, Nathan Johnson. I am Regional Director of Community Health Investment for Providence, and I also serve as Board Chair for the Anchorage Coalitions and Homelessness.
Thank you. Chantel Johnson.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chantel Johnson. I'm the VA Homeless Outreach Social Worker.
Thank you. Jonathan Postanek.
Hello, Jonathan Postotnik, Coordinator for the Anchorage Reentry Coalition.
Thank you. Karen Clemens.
Hi, I'm Karen Clemens. I'm a Housing Stability Manager with Partners for Progress.
Thank you. Kenny P.
Hi, this is Kenny Peterson, community member and also Communication Public Affairs Director for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, North Anchorage Stake. Thank you.
I'm going to go back up and see if Elizabeth with no last name would like to introduce herself.
Hi, sorry about that. I was talking and noticed that my microphone was on mute. However, I'm Elizabeth Amavai. I'm the director for House of Transformations. Glad to be on here and be able to serve with you all.
Thank you. That is everyone. Oh, no, we've had a few join us, and I am Allie Hartman.
Hey everyone, I'm Allie Hartman. I'm the communications coordinator with the Anchorage Assembly Legislative Services team. Excited to hear all about the work being done and progress being made.
Thank you. We have had a few people join us in the room, and I believe go Roger, and then we'll kind of circle back around.
Roger Brampton, mental health advocate and lived experience.
Hi, everybody. Michelle Brown, Rasmussen Foundation. Eva Wisman, Central Lutheran Church.
Thank you.
David Rittenberg with Catholic Social Services, helped to oversee the Brother Francis Shelter and Complex Care Shelter.
Everyone, I think we got everything. Thank you so much. Boy, you know, as a community member and someone who has been really interested in helping the community solve this problem, it is just overwhelming to see how many of you are dedicated to this work and are here today. So thank you so much. I'm going to take just a few minutes and walk through the draft charter that we sent out yesterday, and then I'll go back and we'll look at each section separately and gather any feedback, questions, or concerns you have. And our goal here is that when we...
Linda, I'm sorry. There was a see more for people online that I missed.
There's more people.
More people online. So my apologies to have interrupted, but do you mind if we go ahead and
absolutely
finish this through? Okay. Laura Cox. Sorry about that, folks.
Hey, good morning. Laura Cox, the Director of Supportive Housing over at NeighborWorks Alaska, and I also sit on the Advisory Council for the Coalition.
Thanks, Laura. David Matthews.
Dave Matthews with HUD, ESF 68 liaison with the state EOC.
Okay, sorry, that broke up a little bit. We'll see if that's which side that's on. He ended by saying he's the state liaison with the EOC, Emergency Operations Center. Mike Ross.
I think you may have lost your connection.
Uh-oh. This is what happens when I'm in charge of the technology.
I can still hear clearly, Meg.
Okay, I can hear a little bit too. I wonder if we are just taking on all the bandwidth that exists in the
room too.
In the room, okay.
And that's off the, let me try it on mine real fast. Cause you're.
Well, let's keep trying to go.
You guys keep talking.
Well, I need the participant list.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
Then I'll
All right.
go back in here.
Mike Ross, do you want to try again? All right, we're gonna problem solve this. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna read the remainder of the participant list so we are aware of who's there. And if we get a chance at the end, we'll circle back for their introductions.
That's good. And if you happen to know who they're with, maybe share that as well.
Sure. So Mike Ross, I don't know who he's with. My apologies. Terry, if you know, shout him out. Owen Hutchinson, our Director of External Relations. Karma Reed with HUD, the local HUD office. Shelley Roughton with Assembly Legislative Services. Liam Salter. Scott Ling with Beans.
Beans with SCF.
Oh, sorry, SCF, sorry. This is gonna be a real bad test for me. I'm really bad name. Terrence Shanigan with the Anchorage Health Department. Sean Hayes with Henning Inc. Chad Stovall with HUD. Randy Solt with Anchorage Assembly. Susie P. with Awake. Taylor Donovan with CITC. Wesley Early with APRN. That, I believe, is everyone this time. There are 37 people online. Thank you.
Yep, fantastic. Okay,
Mike Ross is with KTUU. So
Okay.
two are right.
welcome, everybody. If you've got a copy of the charter, and those of you online, I think we'll put it up on the screen. And then I will just quickly walk through it. So the purpose of the task force, this was a task force charged by the Anchorage Assembly with recommending options for the emergency shelter for this coming winter 22-23. That's approximately the October to April timeframe. And this is for adults, the adult population experiencing unsheltered homelessness in Anchorage. The milestones and deliverables for this group. So our kickoff is today. By the 19th, we'd like to be ready to have possible alternatives for recommendations narrowed down. And then a couple of presentations, one on September 22nd to present draft recommendations to the Assembly's Committee on Housing and Homelessness. Hopefully get some feedback at that point and be able to finalize recommendations and present them in writing to the Anchorage Assembly and the mayor. And those recommendations will include all the options that were considered, which options you all recommend going forward, and then the rough order of magnitude, cost, and timelines for the options that you've identified. Goals and desired outcomes. This is kind of a foundational piece of what brings you all together, what you all kind of have as your common ground that you're trying to accomplish. And I think there may be a good bit more to flesh out in this section. So things like that the plans you come up with will reduce the risk of exposure to those harsh winter conditions to persons experiencing homelessness in our community. That the plans that are recommended are actually feasible to implement for this coming winter. And then that the planning process and the recommendations that you all come up with are aligned with and support a long-term strategy, so that this is building into something that is a system approach long-term for the community. And that you come up with recommendations that are seriously considered by the Assembly. The approach. This is our thought on how to bring a kind of typical business decision-making and collaborative approach to a situation where there's not a single obvious answer, and you will likely be choosing between competing options that have a range of things that are good about them and things that are not so good about them. So we're going to try to bring a bit of a structured approach, similar to what we brought to the facilitated process last year. Okay. And so I'll walk through kind of our thinking. First of all, these will be public meetings. They'll be open sessions, and I think, are you using Zoom or Teams?
We're using Teams and we are recording.
Okay, so I already got one wrong. With Teams, and then we'll be talking about how the public will have opportunities to provide feedback. Once we've reduced this down to the active task force, then we'll kind of shift gears a bit. We'll still have open meetings, but we'll be a bit more focused in how we will gather feedback from folks who are not part of the task force, just so we can make some progress. We will be employing what we call a quality decision-making process. And that's to get aligned on what the problem statement is, to develop a range of options, to be aligned on what the criteria are by which you vet those options, and then to narrow them down and build recommendations. So we'll agree on the parameters that define your expected emergency cold weather shelter needs, including the subpopulations and capacity. So the first step that we'll take is actually defining what you think the need is. Next would be identifying a range of potential options. So at this point, not filtering options, but being pretty bold and creative and seeing if we can come up with a range of options here. We'll be encouraging you at that point to not judge them and to not filter them, because many times if we can get a really good, robust set of even crazy options, it helps us in the long run to come up with the best options. For the options that the group identifies, we'll ask that you come up with just some rough order of magnitude cost and what you think the timelines will be, and that'll be one of the criteria by which you can then rank those options. We'll ask you to look at and agree on some other criteria, things that might include consideration of best practices and what local code and require, as well as other things that you might say, and if item A meets this criteria, it's better than item B that doesn't meet that criteria. So we'll be coming up with those. And then you'll develop recommendations based on that evaluation. In terms of the participants who agree to be part of the full-time task force, a couple of things that we would request. One is we want to make sure that this task force represents a pretty good cross-section of the community, both those in government and policy-making roles, people that are representing service providers, people that have some subject matter expertise, as well as bringing some of that lived experience. And if there are other areas that as we collect some feedback that you think we should make sure we've got that representation on the task force, I'll be interested to hear what your input is there. We will be meeting Mondays and Wednesdays throughout August and September, 11:30 to 1:30. And so the request would be that those of you who want to participate in the task force, that you would commit to attending all of those sessions, as well as to complete work that's required in between those sessions. So it's going to be a really busy month to meet this target. So with that, I'll back up, and I want to go back up to the task force purpose. And I'd like to hear any comments or questions about the purpose of this committee, just to make sure that we're all on the same page.
It seems as though the task force is focusing on recommendations to be made at the end of September, which then when you start thinking about implementation time, that puts us to December 1 for starting. And is there a part of this task force that may focus on now? Today, because it's going to start freezing up here in the next month. And so is there like a separate quick thing happening while this goes forward?
That's a great question, Nancy. So we're having a camera issue again. Tech is not my thing. So we are just using this one. So I apologize for those online because I'm sitting directly behind the camera. Let me know if you can't see or hear me. So there already been some movement around emergency cold weather sheltering. And I guess maybe that's something we should have briefed quickly on, which is there is a family plan in the works to be ready for October 1. And Brother Francis Shelter has agreed to increase its census by a portion starting September 1. So there are some smaller approaches, but it's not the larger group of individuals we know are currently experiencing unsheltered homelessness. So that's kind of where we're at. So I would say yes, and the options we're talking about here are what we'll talk more about this probably on Wednesday, but is what we know as the universe of people who are likely in need for this winter. I fully get the temperature is already dropping and it is very wet. Obviously, if there's something immediately implementable, we have policymakers in the room who could possibly run with that.
I think that there should be maybe a small subgroup that looks at emergency and life-saving actions that can happen, because this actually is the most dangerous time of the year. When it gets cold, people are prepared for it and they have coats, but wet and approaching freezing is the time that we will lose people. And so, I think of things like a warming hut at the campground, or if there isn't locations like that available, you're going to need, some people are gonna start having their boots wet, you know, like there's some really basic emergency planning things that need to happen. And also, I think this population has now been about a month and a half out from having the medical checks that were happening every day at the Sullivan. And without those medical checks, there are so many people who are going to have more issues as it gets colder. So like, there's a lot of things that could happen with a very urgent focus.
Could we make that actionable through the shelter leadership group we already convene? And just convene them more often and more quickly. So that are the folks, you know, that are talking about, you know, current shelter capacities, whether or not there is any, and move through that using that convening.
I think that'd be a great question for those shelter providers, because the people who run shelters know these things, you know, very, very well.
I'm putting it out, not just to you, I guess.
Yeah, no, but I
There's
would
a
also
bunch of
think
you
that
here.
outreach teams are also the other ones. If you had maybe like a combined group that focused on it together.
We're just gonna run out of time of the amount of capacity people have to convene. So we do have outreach case conferencing once a week. We also have a shelter leadership group that kind of, it meets, but we can meet more regularly if that makes sense.
I would be happy to meet more regularly and try and problem solve. I think some of the issues that Nancy brings up, that shelter leadership group may not have the resources to provide, like medical checks, like a warming tent, or, you know, some of those things you suggested. So, you know, I think there's a lot of people in that group that could put their heads together and come up with some creative solutions. But again, I think it'd be a question of resources to provide those. I know, you know, as a shelter provider, you know, we're used to providing services on site. We don't have a lot of capacity. You know, we do outreach and stuff like that elsewhere. I know other shelter providers, you know, I think the provider community is there and present, and using the resources that they have available. I think if we had access to a warming tent, that probably would already be up, but I don't think that those types of solutions are things that shelter providers and people in that group in and of itself have the ability to stand up.
We have John Weddleton's hand up also, Meg, when that time happens. And Emily, we're trying not to use the chat, so if you would love to make your comment, and if you can't, I'm happy to read your comment out, Emily.
John, are you there?
Sure. You know, one thing looking at the start here, it would be helpful to know roughly how many people we're talking about, you know, if it's 200 or 400.
So our hope here was to set some ground rules around the charter and then to get into how many and what we're talking about in more depth. I mean, if you just need a back of the napkin figure just to put it in your heads type situation, probably 350 individuals currently experiencing unsheltered homelessness in our community. That doesn't account for inflow, and it doesn't account for anything else. And it doesn't tell you anything about who they are.
So we do intend to dive into that at the next meeting.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Good question, John. Was there somebody else online that had a comment? And then we'll go to.
Yeah, this is Emily. I apologize for using the chat. I missed that memo. My question was about the process and whether or not if we're going to engage the people who are at either Centennial or other shelters. I think it's great that you have so many service providers coming together, but I wanted to ask the group if part of the process, if we were going to incorporate any sort of town hall or ask them for their input, considering they're the ones on the receiving end of these services. Their voices matter, and their experience and insight would probably be really valuable to this process. So I was curious if that was discussed at all.
Thank you, Emily. Yes, and I've been trying to come up with some ideas to bring to the group for consensus building. I think taking all of us to a town hall to folks who are unsheltered could be a little bit overwhelming, but I've thought about ways to integrate it into our outreach work, particularly getting some feedback on some particular questions and things that would matter most in this work to people with lived experience. I think that would be something, again, we didn't want to get too far into the substance today that we could bring on Wednesday. Partly this has been less than a week, so we're really trying to be very deliberate about how we bring the information forward so that we have the time to do the back end work to bring you a full picture or ideas to then toss around and discuss.
I'm sorry, I don't remember your name.
My name's Kelvin Lee.
No.
Guys, in Fairbanks, y'all know it gets really, really cold in Fairbanks. And what we did a couple of years ago is we started warming centers and warming stations. And I think we took trailers. We took a trailer, put it like kind of on between the shelter and the social services that are downtown. So people can just come get warm, get some socks, get some clothes, get some food. So I was just listening to what Nancy was saying. I think that's a really good idea. If you can find organizations that are willing to open up their space, right, for those couple of hours a day. Or we kind of fit it in the middle of the day, from like 10 to 2 or 10 to 3 because the shelters are open. But there's opportunities, what I'm saying, when people were freezing to death up there. So you said what No Limits did is just got involved quickly. So I think the conversation is great, but if we don't do something, I'm not telling you what to do, but we did something right then. We just opened up our space. We had a grant that allowed us to operate this space. So we doubled the capacity. And it was right along when the pandemic, so they cut us down. You can have 10 people, but that kind of hurt us too. But just getting involved, just not have, we had a conversation, but that's all we had, and then we just got started. So I think that's really good. That's something that organizations, people, decision makers can, like me, I would open up my organization. I can help 25, 30 people, or whatever. So that's just something I wanted to put out there.
Thanks for sharing experience from another community. That's really helpful. Anybody else have comments around just the kind of the overall purpose, and then we'll dive into some of the other details?
Yeah, just to add to that and what Nancy was saying, this is a situation where right now that need is there as against the plan we have for the winter season. So right now, what I hear her say is we need a warming station right there at Centennial Park. If it's like a trailer or a Connex or something to be provided so that between now and the time this task force finishes its job, there will be no fatalities. So that's what I'm hearing. So if it's another group or this group or the policymaker, something has to be done between now and the time we finish this project, this chapter.
So I think these are all really good ideas for this urgent. I think I got the message loud and clear that we've got kind of a two-piece problem. We've got getting something in place kind of for the overall winter and having as well thought out a plan as possible. But then we have this really urgent, immediate need. If I could ask us to bifurcate or separate that conversation just for now. And as we're talking through this charter, let's focus on the more the long-term or immediate long-term for this winter. And then we will have time before we close up today to come back to the topic of the urgent and capture some ideas about how we might go about that. Is that okay with everyone if we take that approach? Because I'm not discounting what you're saying. I think it's extremely urgent. I also want us to make some progress on the larger charter that the group has. So let's talk about the milestones and deliverables for this group. The end target date is this September 26th, which I think is that a regular assembly meeting date? Yeah, being able to go in at that point with a recommendation, which means I think the written recommendations would have to go in the Friday before that.
Yeah, the date is the 27th for the assembly meeting. And so they can always go as potentially late as the day of, but of course, we're not going to shoot for that. That's why we have some of those other dates.
Okay. Are there any other target milestones or dates that anybody thinks that we should have included here that we weren't thinking about? So let's talk about approach. I heard, so one thing that came up just a few minutes ago that I think is an addition to the approach is building in some sort of formal engagement of people with lived experience, people that are currently in the situation. So we'll add that, and then at our next meeting, we'll be talking about, okay, exactly how might we do that and start getting at the details. Are there any other things like that that you think we should build into the process? One of the questions that, or ideas that Meg and I had is that it potentially, when the task force is established, is that it breaks into some smaller groups, maybe to work on subpopulations or one particular issue. Has anybody worked on an issue like this and seen a method that works really well in terms of taking a topic like this and breaking it down? Do you have any ideas from other work that you've done?
Brian can't see me smiling, but South Central Foundation's a pro at this.
Okay, well, we'll listen to the pro then.
Thanks, Nancy. Yeah, and pro respect to we're well versed to meet the needs of Alaska Native American Indian population. We're the primary health provider, behavioral provider. That population, we do have a large intensive case management team, which offers services to both Alaska Native and non-Alaska Native people. So I'm thinking about how we might leverage some of that to tackle this.
As a, for example, we were saying if we identify that, one thing we'll know is that no one site can have more than 150 individuals. It will be a limitation we have. So if we know we have 150 elders, do we want to break into a group to plan for them? As an example, or if we have a congregate and a non-congregate location, do we want to have separate groups around that planning, et cetera? So that was kind of where the thought came from.
I have a thought. When in working in projects, it's also very helpful to have people who have different roles in that project walk through the idea. So line staff, reviewing the plan with line staff, reviewing the plan with responders, the police or fire who may be coming to that site. So just making sure that your group has that representation of other entities that will support the work in the community.
There's a question in the chat from Bill Falsey, and this is a reminder to folks who are joining us online to raise your hand and you can offer it on the record verbally because it's easier for the folks in person. Bill Falsey asked, are we going to also identify funding resources or leave that to the assembly and administration?
That's a great question, and one we probably get into a little bit more depth, but what we've put in the approach is, or in the goals and desired outcomes, is rough order of magnitude costs. But we don't want to get down into the weeds about the decisions that government may choose to make about how to effectuate these plans. We could certainly offer up ideas, but ultimately we want to give them a menu of options so that they can make the policy choices about how much and from where they may choose to spend the money to meet these goals.
Question. Anybody else online that raised their hand? Okay. What other goals or desired outcomes do you guys have? When we get to the end of this and you have come up with a recommendation, what will you use to judge that as a really good recommendation? What are you trying to accomplish?
For me, that the plan maybe has utility beyond this winter and might spur an additional task force or meeting about ways we can look at emergency sheltering in different conditions other than with a temperature trigger.
Anybody else?
I think just it's sort of in light of that, also thinking about the multiple, and not that we're going to solve all these things, but as we start to think about the different types of populations and the different systems that are feeding those populations, whether that be mental health, substance use, for us OCS or things like that, that we are, as we design responses that potentially could take us into the future, that they would be honed in on specific populations like that, like what's just come on, with you guys at C Street there, but just really being able to hone in on populations.
So populations with specific needs,
Mhm.
but, okay.
So that the interventions can meet those needs.
Lisa Aquino, I see your hand up.
Hey folks, yeah, thanks. I just appreciate it. I was just, and I apologize for being late, Elisa Aquino with Anchorage Neighborhood Health Center. In terms of judging this, I would definitely, my main thing that I'd be thinking about, I bet you're all thinking about it, is just feasibility and that it can come online fast enough, right? And that there's an operator or somebody that can step in to do it, or multiple, probably multiple, right? But just, I think the thing about the winter plan is we have to have that. It has to get done now.
Thanks, Lisa.
I was wondering about something you said, and I'm not sure it was implied in there, or if I'm off or something slightly separate, but not only turning on and off shelter based on temperature, but does this grow into something that moves people towards housed? So we leverage some of this, so we're not doing this again next winter about this time, where it's wet and cold. So I guess I'd offer that up.
Great.
I would also, like to see us focus on accessibility for people experiencing homelessness. I think making sure that we do have some voices, uplift experience, and thinking about, I know one of the struggles that we have with Centennial Campground is that it's 2 miles from the closest source of food, which is a gas station. So making sure that we're not just thinking about what is going to be the building that's going to, we're going to be able to stand up the fastest, but what's going to be a practical solution that, people are going to be able to access. So, if we do get something off the beaten path, making sure we're thinking about transportation or, just sort of those nuts and bolts, or how are people going to get there and get away from there and meet the needs that they have while they're there.
Yes.
Just to add to that, I just wanted to highlight that I think we need to remember that Centennial is one part of the issue, and that there's probably an equal amount of people camping throughout the city elsewhere, and they're not getting any of the attention that Centennial is.
These are all really good goals. What else?
This is Emily. I know we're not using the chat, but I think that there might be, like, throughout this process, there might be some other models that are taking place across our country that we can maybe look to, especially with high Indigenous populations, what they've maybe done that might be termed like unconventional, or just not your typical solution. And I think looking to those other communities might be beneficial to us as we continue to kind of harvest the group thinking here. And so I don't know where we would share that, but I'm really looking forward to that, because this seems like an ongoing conversation. And, what have we, like, are there things that we haven't done before that we might be able to look at other states or communities across the country?
Really good. Thank you, Emily.
And I want to offer up, one of the reasons the coalition staff is here is to facilitate and then to go do some of that kind of homework. So if there are questions, so we're already looking at what are other communities doing? What are some of the best practices from HUD? So we're ready to bring that information to you all. So if there are questions like that, that you want to raise, the more heads up we get, the better. So we have the chance to go in and do that, talk to our colleagues around the country. So just wanted to let you all know that's one of the roles we're playing here.
So maybe that's permission to ask a question. I haven't heard that the military's here. Maybe I missed it.
The VA is represented online. Chantel Johnson is on.
I was actually thinking about Jager. I mean, they have an expertise in providing shelter in very short order, and I don't know if it's a long-term solution, but
We can also take questions out to other folks that we need to test ideas with or ask if they have resources. In the prior facilitation, we would occasionally do that if there was something we identified and we needed to bring someone to the table for a specific need. Thank you.
That's a really good point. There any others like that?
Yeah, I have one more on the goals. I see here that the task force will do a whole lot of work and present a recommendation to the assembly. But I don't know what comes after that. So is the task force just gonna do a bunch of homework, paperwork, present it, and then what if nothing happens after that? So how do we factor that in?
Good question.
So I hate to put any of the policymakers on the spot, but I mean, really, we've been asked by government to come up with some recommendations and a plan to get back to them. And so what they do with it then is.
Are you wanting me to respond to that? Sure. So, yeah, so the whole sort of end point of this was the September 27th assembly meeting, when we would have a plan before the assembly and allocations for the assembly to consider. So what money are we going to spend to actually fund the plan? So it's really going to be up to sort of the political will of the body, the political will of the mayor to actually work together to put some funding together to actually make all of your work worthwhile. So that is sort of, for me, the last and final step on the policymaker side. And then, of course, there's the implementation afterward, of making sure that the money from the administration's end gets out the door, so that we can actually start moving the cogs to make all of this happen.
Bill Falsey in the chat has their hand up. Bill?
Thanks, Owen. Sorry, I've been in a little bit of a noisy place. But on the question of goals and desired outcomes, I understand that the primary task is hurry up and offer everyone a feasible, quickly implementable solution so that we get out of this winter's problem and then hopefully break the mold so that we're never here again. I'm also wondering, to what extent does this group want also to take on as a goal or desired outcome some kind of generating some sort of public support for this plan? So we don't have bullet points now that are like, we've published the plan and, you know, appeared on Channel 2 News and the radio and done an Compass piece, but somewhat motivated by Emily's comment about getting buy-in from people actually experiencing homelessness. I'm also thinking about community buy-in and how that could potentially help keep everything greased for this solution to actually be implemented and assist in the assembly process itself. So I don't have strong views, but I thought I would offer that for consideration. There might be some bullet points about publicizing the outcome of this group's effort and sort of garnering support for it.
It's probably a really good opportunity to talk about two things. The recordings of these meetings will go up on the coalition's website, and we'll send the link to where you can always find them. So that's one. Two is every week, probably by Thursdays, if we're meeting Monday and Wednesday, we will capture a lot of this in notes, and we will publish those notes as well. And then the third piece to that is that 9/19 date to finalize possible alternatives for recommendations is so that there is, I mean, it's not going to be a ton of time. We need to give ourselves some time to do work. And then we need to give, you know, a heads up before there's the assembly committee meeting where we're going to hopefully discuss those in public, but the opportunity to get kind of those finalized recommendations out to the public. So it'll be iterative, so the public can follow along with the iterative work. We can choose as a group how we want to further publicize those updates, those weekly updates, we can have the community council folks send them out. We could do a lot of things, but I think as we work through it, we should decide, as we create those weekly updates, who's our audience? So, so totally open to all of that, but this is a very transparent and open process. So hopefully we can bring everyone along with us as we go. And we do have, so Owen is our Director of External Relations, so he will pick up the ball on a lot of that and make contacts with folks as we go.
These are all great inputs. What else is on your mind?
I have one other question. Is there anything to start with, and at the risk of asking a sticky with question, are there any existing plans? Are there things left over from the facilitation group that can be picked up and examined?
Yes and yes. Love to have two yeses. Yes, we can pick up kind of the location evaluations we did with the facilitated process. I think a lot of folks may have like a building in mind or something in mind. We deep dove into a lot of those, and we can talk a little bit. That's why I'm really happy, like John Weddleton's here, and even Belinda was a facilitator. And I was in that group from the very beginning. We went through kind of all of the usual suspects, the Northway Mall or the JCPenney Furniture Warehouse, and we can talk about whether or not something was viable or even available. Because a lot of times we're under a misconception of availability or the willingness to rent. I actually think, Nancy, you could talk a little bit about all the times the municipality has previously tried to rent things and there have been issues with leasing. So I think there's that opportunity. And I've already been working through, HUD has some templates about emergency shelter planning with some various scenarios. So I hope to bring that template to you all on Wednesday and talk about whether or not we think that's a good fit with how we're going to make decisions.
Anybody else we haven't heard from that's got an idea? Do you have anything from your perspective?
Not yet.
Okay, count me. Okay.
So I wonder if there may be some benefit to, this is kind of a nervous question, gauging whether this effort, this group is being done in tandem with or in parallel with another plan that the administration says they are working on. And is there a way to bring those two together before we get to September 26th, when there's some clash of some sort that is hard to resolve?
Can I give my piece on that? And then, sure. So I've already sort of very publicly stated to the administration that whatever plan that they have, that they are possibly working on, that they should hand it over to this group. I think that is the logical place for whatever they were working on to exist. And then that they should be at the table to work with this group. As I understand it, we do have Terrence on the line, and so he may be able to speak to what the administration's plan, what they might be doing with it.
As the convener of this group, though, because I know you're all very busy, I have a slight nuance on that. If a plan from the administration is published, I would like to take it back to the assembly to ask if they believe it is adequate for their purposes. Because if they're fine with it, then they should just move on that plan. If not, or they want us to evaluate it, yes, we should put it in the hopper of options. But I really do want that first look, because if there's agreement on that plan, like, go get it done. And we can talk about maybe some of these other pieces of where we'd like this to follow along. All this talent isn't getting away just because there's a great plan. And I want to be really mindful of our time and you know, your guys' limited capacity. So that, just a heads up, that's we'll be kind of kicking it back to them to be as quickly about it, to do that as quickly as possible.
Karma, I saw your hand up in the chat and then it went down. Was there a comment or a response that you'd like to make?
Hey, thank you. I was thinking of all of the other, I know this is directed to the assembly and that's that's, and the administration, which seems wholly appropriate. There are other bodies such as the Han Commission that has a purview over the consolidated plan, which has money attached to it. There's Alaska Housing and Finance Corporation, which is your public housing authority. And I just want to make sure that when you get the plan, that you're also directly engaging with whatever public process those bodies have to think about their funding resources.
Thanks, Karma. So I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but I just want to know so I can tie it into this charter and the timeline. I know that the administration had indicated they intended to have a plan by the end of the month, which is about a week away. Can we get an update on that status? Anyone from the administration still online? End of the month, still the target, or do we have a draft that can be brought in? Any update?
Why don't I take it away as a to-do is to inquire with them to see if we can see if that is still the target. And I'll do that via email right after the meeting.
Yeah, I'd really just like to build it into the calendar when we know where that's coming. Great. Okay. Anything else on the charter? Anyone has that you want to share? Oh, there's a hand up online, I see. I'm not sure who it is, though. Cal?
If your hand's up online, please go ahead.
Maybe it was someone that didn't take their hand down.
Okay, yeah, I think probably.
They are new to have their hand up and they are unmuted, but we can't hear you, Elizabeth and Linda. I'm not sure if you can get closer to your microphone. We're still having trouble hearing you, Elizabeth and Linda. If you want to put it in the chat, I could read it out if your microphone's not working right now.
Well, maybe we'll move on, and if you are able to get your speakers working, maybe reach back out to us and turn back to get your comments. Sorry about that. Okay, well, that was really very helpful and good conversation on the charter. Never know how long that part of the conversation is going to last, especially with a group this large. Sometimes you get a lot more and sometimes you get less because there's so many people in the room. If you had comments that you weren't quite ready to bring up in the group or that you think about shortly after this meeting, Meg, how can they get those comments back to us?
You can email them to me. Actually, if you respond back to the meeting invite, just don't reply all, just reply. And then we will collate them and then we'll bring the updated charter next meeting.
Yeah, so this was not your last shot. If you come up with some other ideas that you want to factor in. Yeah, my experience in working with groups like this, the charter is really important because it helps get us grounded and get us moving quickly, even though it seems to take a little bit of time at the front end. And we'll continue to refine it as you learn, as you move forward. We'll find things that we didn't think of initially. So let's talk about other issues and concerns. What are some of the potential obstacles or risks that you think this task force is going to need to manage? What could go wrong with this effort? What's going to get in your way of being successful?
I've been involved with nonprofits and at work for a long time. There was this phrase that came up by one of the leaders is that we have a tendency to circle the wagon by shooting in, and we need to be wary of that and realize that we're all in this to help a specific cause and to keep our focus on that cause. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. Very good point. Yes.
I got a list.
Oh,
Let
good.
me get that. I'm gonna say I'm extremely worried about getting to the end of September and having gridlock. I'm really scared because I've watched this the last 2 years. And I don't want to understate it. Second, any plan that we come up with, I'm worried about supplies in any potential construction, any contracting work, because things are tight in supply chains and we don't have any time to do this. Third, I think we need to know what the municipal plan will be regarding people who don't buy in. For campers who do not buy into the plan, how are we going to treat them? And I think that's gonna go a long way to whether this plan is gonna work. And then, I guess this goes to the goal, but this has got to move the needle on a discussion of more housing options, not shelter options, more housing options. Otherwise, we failed.
A follow-up question as to number 3, where you said what the MOA plan is for campers who do not buy in. Are you referring to both the warming tent and abatement, or specifically to abatement, or something else?
To warming and abatement.
Okay, thank you.
May I add something? Another potential challenge is the pandemic, right? We're moving into the winter, so we can probably expect some kind of an uptake. Do we have some sort of COVID-19 protocol in place for our folks experiencing homelessness? That's important.
Thank you.
I think another thing that we're just gonna wanna make sure that we're being intentional about how we consider it is how the plan is going to be implemented. I know, if we make a recommendation on the 26th, when is that RFP gonna go out, and when do we expect the facility to be open? It's taking a long time to hire people, and that for anything that we do here, I heard 150 person cap. So we're probably at a minimum 3 facilities. We're probably looking at, somewhere around multiple dozen staff to be able to hire and train and all of that. And there's just going to have to be, for whichever service providers decide to step up here, that there's going to have to be some runway for that. And so if there's an expected opening date of October 1, I don't think that's the expectation here, but just making sure that we're thinking about all those pieces. So we're setting whoever does decide to operate this up for success.
With your comment, Dave, we also need inquiry with service providers about what is capacity, what's realistic. So we can, as we start to frame out the universe of what's available to, what's needed and what's available to us, we're gonna have to make those inquiries. So hopefully folks will be comfortable talking about, would you be able to staff up for such a thing? And what does that look like? That'll also get into our rough order of magnitude on costs, of course, very quickly.
Penny P in the chat, I see your hand is up if you'd like to make a comment.
Thank you. From a community member perspective, I always find that locating where these would be, as David pointed out, 3 facilities where the location is going to be, and working with community councils, et cetera.
Speaking of community councils, I wanted to raise that it's my intention to try to get on wherever we're at the FCC agenda for September to go talk to them about what work we've been engaged in. So that information then filters out to the community councils. I don't know that we have the bandwidth to try to attend all of the community councils. And then also looping in the FCC just to be watching this work. So again, we don't hit them with it cold. So
Meg, what's the acronym FCC?
Federation of Community Councils. So it's the umbrella organization of all of the presidents or delegates of the community councils attend the FCC meeting. Thanks.
I think there's a challenge that also exists, and I'm Alice, I apologize for being late. That we all don't share a platform where we provide information and data. All the different shelters, all the different programs. And so just being able to figure out if we can come together with a joint agreement that will allow some of that, that would better help us understand people and the number of people that are being housed.
Just to make sure I understood that. So you're saying we'll need to have an agreement to share data across all the different providers and shelter locations.
Right, and it could be outside of HMIS, or it could be outside of what system many participate in, but all don't. And so we've got to figure out a way, if there is a platform or a way that we can communicate, so that we know effectively who's being housed.
Just getting at those that are not currently on HMIS
Right.
primarily. Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate that.
think
That is a homework question.
Yeah.
I think another thought or just something to be thinking about is the potential influx of additional folks into our population. I mean, we're already starting to see that at Centennial and other places. And, you know, I don't know if there's any studies done or any, you know, estimates on what folks think that is looking like around the country, but sense is that I think it's going to be more.
We're ready to present on Wednesday on inflow data and then we can make some assumptions around how many we think will access emergency shelter based on some historical data as well for our community.
Yes.
Can I add a caveat to Josh's comment as well? And I don't think that we're going to see it right immediately because we have such a large PFD coming out this year early, that's going to buy people a few months. And so I'm worried that come December, January is when we're really going to feel the full impact of it because people are going to have money for some type of situation for a while. So I think what we see in September and October is not the real picture. And I just want us to kind of asterisk that because I think there's going to be a lot of people utilizing their permanent fund money to pull up somewhere.
And this might tie into Lisa's comment that does anyone or can we compile visibility into the end dates of all the rent assistance programs that are out?
Say that one more time. I didn't.
Can we compile the end dates of all rental assistance programs that are happening? Because those are cliffs that we should be planning for.
A lot of them are coming up now.
So we can come back if you think of another thing that you're worried about. Those are usually the things front of mind on an issue like this. But I'd like to also ask you to think about what are some potential opportunities. And those are things that could help this work, things that could be positives if we recognize them and go after them quickly.
I believe there's still additional tranches of MOA rental assistance that haven't moved through the system through the Emergency Rental Assistance 2 program. So I would really like to explore how those funds could become available and leveraged to assist.
So I'd like to throw out another opportunity, and that is in the state has been working hard at training up some peer support specialists. These are people that are getting a certificate that allows them to work for an entity where they can do peer support. These are largely people with lived experience. So this would be a potential resource that we could use. That writers could use the 1115, possibly use the 1115 waiver to employ people who have been trained in these techniques, the best practices with lived experience, with you know, similar experiences to the folks that are currently homeless, to go in and establish a relationship for, you know, and I think that's a huge resource that we've not had as a state ever.
I think also just to sort of extend that comment is that we are going to be needing to hire multiple dozen people, and then we have quite a few individuals that are going to need to be looking for some source of income as well. You know, having worked in shelter for a long time, some of our best staff have been people with lived experience. So, you know, I think there's some opportunity there as well. And anyway, I know a lot of people here are trying to hire people from the, you know, general public, and that goes slow. But I think there's also some opportunity there to get people with lived experience into these programs and earning some income, some work history.
Good.
I think there's also opportunity to maximize some of the things that we already have in place. Like for us, we have our gym space. You know, last year we did some extra sheltering of different populations, and so like we could maximize with some additional dollars to cover those specific costs. Like we could take 21 to 24-year-olds in our gym in the beds in there and things like that. So just thinking through the different things that folks already have, because that already puts more young people right connected to our youth engagement center, you know, where there's already services. So places that already have services or, you know, connection points, being able to lift up some of those if possible also.
Yeah, I think it's kind of to add on, it's a positive. We're in the final processes of a change of use, which will allow us to serve in residence young people up to the age of 25. Whereas before our residential services stopped at 21.
I think what we have here too is expressed by this group is one of our big assets is we have a lot of community engagement here. I mean, I think, you know, we don't often get this level of community engagement around single adults, you know, single adult homelessness. And I think that's really great. So I think we need to acknowledge that. I think it's really, really important. So.
Perhaps added to that is public awareness. I don't think it's ever been greater.
And I would add to that as well. It's like I've been part of these conversations for many years. This is the first time I've ever had a large conversation about emergency cold weather shelter in August. It chuckles around the room, but you know, it's we do know time is tight, but we actually do have time. There's no snow up on the mountains yet. There is some up in the valley, but not here. So, you know, I just want to thank the coalition and everyone who came to the table for starting this conversation in August, you know, so we can actually have a shot at this.
Anybody online? Anybody else have anything to add?
I think the alcohol tax is a benefit with that income that's coming in that we haven't had in the past. And we haven't been able to effectively figure out how to access that, but as we do, I think that that is an added plus over this year that's not been in the past.
Is it allowed to go back to a potential obstacle that I think is a big one we didn't name?
Not for you, for anyone else.
The status of the mass care facility at the Aviator. I think we've got to get clarity on that. That's 200 and some individuals that is currently slated to close at the end of September. Because I don't know whether or not we should be including that in the universe of individuals we're planning for. Sorry to go backwards.
That's okay.
I have a question also outside of Emily's suggestion about people with lived experience. Are there people who should be at this table early on who are not in the room or online that we could identify or think of?
I've captured everyone, and so we'll put that list out too. So if you're not quite tracking everyone who's here, you'll be able to see that. And if we need to extend additional invitations, please let me know.
Is there
Emily
anyone...
also just made a comment in the chat, and I don't know if Emily wants me to read it or can unmute, but I'd just like it to be heard by the group. She says, I hope that this is the first step. Alaska Natives make up the majority of the population in various shelters, yet there is little to no cultural programming. Finding shelter is the first, but we need to work together to help foster healing. As leaders, we need to normalize healing. There is a legacy of assimilation and cultural genocide in Alaska, so what we are all witnessing is a symptom of a root cause of ongoing colonization, intergenerational trauma, and systems not designed for Indigenous people to succeed.
Can we applaud?
Yeah.
Thank you. I didn't get all of that, so if you capture the chat, you can
Yep,
send it
we'll
to
capture
me.
the chat.
I'm pretty good at typing while I'm thinking, but not that fast.
Thing too. I think we really do have the will of the community to make this happen. And I think there's a lot of different ways it can happen. And but you know, in the years I've been doing this, which is almost a decade now, and certainly Allison has way more experience than I do with it, but I've never seen the focus on it, the resources actually being committed. And now we just have to come up with the way to actually do it, is kind of how I feel. So I feel like we're right on that precipice of, you know, we've finally got the will for the most part. We've got some financial resources behind it. Now it's time to just make shit happen. So.
So we'll move on. If you think of something else, we can definitely go back, or you know how to get information to Meg that we can build into this. I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but do we have folks sitting here today that already know that you've got the capacity and interest that you want to be full-time with the task force?
Yes.
Can we build that as a possible list?
Actually, okay, we're just gonna, I'm gonna
Pass
send it
around?
around to put this down, and then, this will be a time we'll ask you to type in the chat if you have the ability to fully commit to the task force. One caveat I want to add to that is what we've learned in prior, problem solving like this is it's very iterative. So if you are committing, or if you are committing as an agency, it's like you and that person who's gonna be at your hip. It's really hard to dip in and out of this work. So I just wanna say that because it'll make me very frustrated if we're constantly playing catch up with folks. So we have a lot to do. So in the room, we're gonna pass around. And then Owen, if you can capture names in the chat for folks who want to commit to doing this. So this is that 11:30 to 1:30 Mondays and Wednesdays. And I have a schedule through the 22nd of September. And they will continue to be hybrid meetings.
Great. Okay, well, let's talk about Wednesday's meeting. I know, Meg, you already have some ideas of what you expect to have on the agenda for Wednesday. Could you share that? And then maybe we can get some input if there's some other things that people think should be on the agenda for Wednesday. First bite at the apple.
So the very first thing I'd like to do is define the universe of need. So who are we talking about? How many are we talking about? What are the characteristics of the individuals we are talking about? We have data, so let's use that data to inform kind of where we're starting from. Also talking about historical inflow and utilization of emergency shelter in the winter. So not only who are we talking about how many are we expecting will take advantage of the resource. So those are two pieces. As I say these things out loud, I'm making myself notes because it's in my brain, but, and then I also want to, if it's applicable, I'll know a little bit more after today, is review the HUD matrix. And that's a good planning tool because it deals with a capacity that could roll or change over time and needs that could change over time. And then finally, I was hoping by then to have a quick, survey of what other communities are doing that have similar circumstances, so we don't hopefully have to reinvent the wheel. So whether they're activating hotels or various types of buildings, or they're using some rapid rehousing strategy or whatever it is, to survey that and show how they're alike with our circumstances so that we can say, that looks like something we want to explore, or that looks like something we want to explore. And then I've added, although it may not be fully done by Wednesday, really starting to think about the data and information sharing component of this that Allison mentioned. So maybe some examples, and we can start to vet what that might look like as we move forward. So those are what I have.
Do you think that on Wednesday, we would, after having that information, we would be at the point that we could kind of get the task force a little organized in terms of how we might split out, divide and conquer?
I think there's a pre-decision there is, should we split out
Right.
and divide and conquer because we're seeing that particular need? And then if so, along what lines?
Yeah, so how to organize the work could come out of Wednesday's meeting. Do you think that Wednesday would be a good time to, assuming we have time, to at least take a few minutes and capture some initial brainstorming on ideas so that we start to build some options? So if you're going to be here, maybe give that some thought to bringing in some ideas.
I would really like to do that on Wednesday if we can, so that Belinda and I can go back and take those ideas against maybe what was considered in the prior facilitation and provide you information if something was completely not feasible. We won't do it in the moment, but we can take back if you're identified particular locations, so we can ask some informed questions like, did this circumstance or that circumstance change about that particular location based on what we already knew? I'm going to do a lot of the homework for you folks. So you can come with ideas and then I'll try to run them down and ground truth them, because really when we get in the room, we want to really wrestle with them. And so you all don't have to be calling realtors and folks like that. We'll take a lot of that on.
Yeah, so I kind of see this first real meeting as you'll really hone in on what your problem statement is. Time frame, the number of people, the characteristics, all of that. So we'll really hopefully leave Wednesday with the task force having a common understanding on what you think the problem statement is. Identifying information and data that you have, information and data you'd like to have, and can we figure out what the source is? And then starting that brainstorming effort. So that kind of gets us past the first step and a half of the decision-making process.
We also agree that by Wednesday, we would have a plan for, like Nancy brought up at the beginning, sort of what's the emergent piece of this that we're gonna start, and who's gonna work on that, and what the mechanism is, what conversation.
Be bringing forward and working with Nancy on a few ideas, and we can see if that captures how you all might want to tackle it.
We better to come in with something to kick rather
Sure.
than a blank slate of paper.
Yeah, you got it.
Okay, so Nancy, you got an action item already.
That's how it works when you hang out with me.
Yeah. Got me here. Anything else that you think we should have on the agenda for Wednesday?
Is there anyone online that would like to add something for the agenda for Wednesday? I would like to ask the group if there are any of you who are just experts in communication and communication with the public. At some point, we will need a small size or a small group who really thinks through how we're communicating with the public. And that's always very different than when we get down into the weeds in the room. It was really one of the biggest challenges out of facilitation. So if you feel like you are a comms expert or you just have that knack, love those volunteers. And then a piece of homework, if I may give it to Felix, is there a date or two that we would need to come and brief the entire assembly in a work session fashion before the committee? If you wanted to maybe run that down so we could add that to our timeline.
Would have one other thing for Wednesday meeting, to possibly think of, is there any individuals that have not elected to be on the task force that we want to invite a little bit more strongly, that we may want to identify some of those individuals then.
Great. I will break up the participant list when I send it out into everyone who is here today and those who committed to the task force. So you can twist arms if you so need, or if you want to identify someone we should probably bring in at critical junctures that may not be able to make the full commitment, but we're really going to be asking for a narrow piece of their subject matter expertise.
Also, briefly, I just want to say for the 30-some people online, I only have one confirmed person who's committed to being on the task force for the extent of September. So if there are people who are currently online who are committed but did not put their name in the chat, please do so now.
Is there something on the agenda for like operator outreach or getting that list of potential operators so that we can include them early in the conversations?
I think as we start to kind of put in to the ballpark what we're looking for, then yeah, absolutely. We'll have to do that. It may just not be for Wednesday. It may be the following week. But yeah, I hear you.
House of Transformation would like to be part of the task force. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
I can't find the chat function on our thing here, so I can't add it. So House of Transformation and Lena Mavega would all, with House of Transformation and Signet Ring would like to be part of this group.
Okay, great. I have it down and I will make sure that that is reflected. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth and Linda. Your microphone works now.
Yay.
Okay, well, we're kind of completing the agenda a little bit ahead of schedule, but Meg, do you have anything else you want to discuss?
I have one more thought. If you are in any of the coalition's regular standing meetings and you think that a piece of this discussion might be appropriate to wrap into those, whether it's a case conferencing meeting or I don't know what it might be. We convene so many meetings. Let's not let this be the full universe of this conversation. Our staff is prepared and knowledgeable about what's happening, that they can at least capture things that I think would be really valuable, because those standing meetings are the ones who are actually, you know, with the providers doing all the work in real time. So I think it's important to raise it if you feel that that's appropriate in your various meetings that you are on, and I'll have all of our conveners ready for it.
Okay, does anybody have anything you want to offer up for the good of this effort before we wrap up and close out for the day?
I'd like to thank everybody for coming here, for the community support. And I'd like to take back the count to tell the people that we're working on. Thank you.
Also, I'm just wondering if we could have a part of that. I don't remember who was speaking earlier, but said they had a list of facilities maybe that have already been looked at that are would be available. You know, whether it's the hotels or the JCPenney or the Northway Mall, you know, that those kind of resources, so that as we're putting it together, we're not being redundant on looking for things.
Yeah, thanks for that. So I don't think we want to rule out everything to start with that has already been looked at. We're just asking that if you bring one of those forward, what we're going to do is we're going to go and review our prior information and see if it's still accurate and then share that. So if you want to bring forward a JCPenney furniture warehouse or a Northway Mall, that's great. And then what we can do is we can review it in the context of the information we have and any updates to that information, because things change. We don't know. That information kind of ended about 11 months ago. So there may be changes. There may just be some things we know about those facilities as well that just make them unsuitable because they don't have the ability to have the showers or the bathrooms or something like that. And I'm just making that up, but we captured a lot of that information in the prior work. Also, the list was really extensive, so if we know which ones, then it will be much easier to digest.
Yeah, I think we had a list of almost 80 locations, everything from big to small. But a lot of the evaluation of those properties happened, like she said, almost a year ago. And so I don't want to rule anything out at this point. And maybe there's some new things that weren't of it. We didn't think about them now. It's a little bit different situation than what the group was trying to solve then. Okay, well, Meg, I think that I don't have anything else to add for this group. Would you like to offer any closing comments and we'll let people get out a little bit early today?
Thank you so much. I think that this is a good start. It's going to move quickly and we're going to move rather apace. So I appreciate your commitments to this, of course. And if you have any questions, concerns about how it's going, feel free to reach out to me. The coalition is really sitting in this space to help convene and then share some of the things we've learned and then go run down information. So again, don't be shy. We'll be as diligent as we can in getting you all the tools you need to work through this process. Thanks.
Do you have any comments on the facilitation of this effort as well? I'm one of the, I'm listed in the invites to this, so you can find me and email me separately if you have any comments on facilitation as well.
Everyone online, thank you so much. I'm going to end it. Oh,
That's your-
yeah.